She's published over 30 books, is an award-winning actress, and has been married for over 30 years to the writer and film director Bryan Forbes. Welcome with me then, if you will, Nannette Newman. Nanette, where were you born?
I was born in Northampton.
What did your parents do?
Well, my mother and father were in Variety, and they met when they were 16, and my father had an Adagio act.
What's that?
I thought you might be going to say. Well, you know where you have a man and a woman, and the man throws the woman around, or it's sort of vaguely acrobatic and sort of dancing and acrobatic and things like that. They had an act together when they were very young, and they used to tour around. And then when my mother had me, she gave up the act, and my father continued with other partners. And he was in Variety really until he died, and he then moved into cabaret, which he didn't like nearly as much. He was truly, of that old Variety school.
Were there other children of the marriage?
No, I was the only one.
Were you therefore ruined?
You can see, yes. I was the apple of my daddy's eye. I don't know. It's always difficult to know if you're ruined. And I only know that they did actually die. My mother died. They both died very young, really. So I suppose the sad thing is that I never got to know them as people. You know how when you get older you get to know your parents more as people than just as your mummy and daddy. So I never reached that point. I only my mother died when I was about 17, and I remember them as being, they were wonderful to me, adored me. I adored them. My mother was a very beautiful woman who was tragically very ill with cancer, and my father, I still think, was one of the most handsome men I've ever seen, and I wish that they'd lived to see me, have my family and be happy and everything.
Where were you educated?
Well, when I was very small, I used to go on tour with my father. I used to think going on summer seasons to places like Clacton, and I spent a lot of time in chorus girls' dressing rooms. I thought that life was just wonderful. It was even taken on the last night of the show, at the end of the chorus, and introduced and everything. So I thought that was fun, and so I guess I missed a bit of school that way. I then we lived in Streatham, in a block of flats in Streatham, and I went to a school in Streatham, and I think in those days people weren't so there weren't so many rules and regulations about school, so I was taken away a lot. I wish now that I'd had a better education. I don't think I was particularly good at school. I used to get on my report, which I found a report, or one of my daughters gleefully found one of my reports, which she pounced on, which said if she didn't giggle so much and concentrated more, she could do well. And I do remember giggling a lot and having a lot of fun and being generally rather disruptive and naughty. So that part of my education at the school in Streatham, I think I was very happy, but I don't know that I learnt as much as I should. I also, at the same time, was going to the Italia Conti stage school, which I went to when I was 12, and trained. Then I wanted to be a dancer. And then when I was 16, two things happened to me. I went with a girlfriend for an interview at RADA. She was going for a scholarship, and she said, would you come in for it with me? And I went in with her, really, just as a kind of thing to do with a friend. And I won a Lever Hume scholarship, which my father was very thrilled about, and said, oh, well, now you ought to go to RADA, as you've got a scholarship and it's free, and we didn't have much money. And also that year I met Bryan, so really it was a pretty good year for me. So I went to RADA and immediately abandoned the idea of being a dancer and thought I'd be an actress. And the thing at RADA, you see, then as now, was that you weren't allowed to work, whereas I'd always worked. I'd worked since I was 12, so that was quite strange for me, really. But I then I got married at 18.
Can you tell me some of your contemporaries at RADA?
Yes, well, there were lots of people. I mean, I think I missed Joan Collins, because everybody says, were you there with Joan Collins? I wasn't. I missed her. She'd gone. But around the time, you see, it's always very strange at RADA because you're all in different groups. So people, Ian Holm was around. And, I met somebody the other day who said, do you remember Joe Orton was at RADA? He was finishing when we started, and I said, no, I never. And they said, oh, he was very strange. Everybody thought he was very clever. I don't remember him at all. I think I must have seen him, but I don't remember him. And I think around about the same time, I'm not sure that Albert Finney was just around there at that time, although I didn't, wasn't with him. Thelma Holt, who's now quite a well-known producer. I think there were quite a few people who did rather well.
Do you remember the first paid role you had?
Well, I was 12 when I had my first paid role. It was in a film called Here We Come Gathering, a turgid story about 4 children who go to Kent. And I remember going to Kent to make the film and crying for my mummy so much that my mother was brought in as a chaperone to be with me, because I remember it was the first time really I'd been away, and I thought, if this is being an actress, I don't want to go, because I wanted my mummy with me. So I was paid for that, and then I did lots of things. I was in Where the Rainbow Ends, and I was paid for that. But Here We Come Gathering was the first thing. I don't remember what I was... Were you going to ask me what I was paid? Because I don't remember. I'm sure it was very little.
After RADA then, and to the more conventional start to the career, as it were, where did you go then?
Well, I was at RADA. I did a film called was it called? It was either called Personal Affair. The title was changed a couple of times. It was Or a Day's Mischief. It was called in the end, I think, with Jean Tierney, and I played a schoolgirl, which is really what I was, and that had quite a lot of publicity, more publicity than the role demanded, because it was really a spit and a cough. It wasn't much of a part, and it sort of, for some reason, I think they were in need of somebody to publicise on the film, and it was me. So I had a lot of publicity on that. But by then I'd met Bryan, and I went into rep for a while, but I was desperately in love, and my father disapproved and didn't want me to meet Bryan ever, or get married. And my mother then died, and Bryan was wonderful, and you know, my father was still in Variety, and I think eventually my father realised that there I was, somebody that he'd got to continue to bring up, and I think he was quite happy that there was somebody who was responsible. Eventually he realised, even though he was an actor and a writer, who was quite responsible. So in the end, my father was still around when I got married, so that was nice.
It's very difficult to stop Bryan Forbes talking about Nannette Newman, and it's extremely difficult to get Nannette Newman to stop talking about Bryan Forbes. Let's leave him out of it just for a moment. I promise we'll come back to it. Were there, in fact, any false starts, as it were, in the acting career?
Well, I suppose false starts. You could say that. You see, when I got married, I have to bring Bryan into this. I got married.
You would do.
When I got married, I didn't have the ambition that I'd obviously had when I was at RADA, because by now I'm besotted and with the unmentionable man in my life, and so I worked rather haphazardly. I worked when it meant that I was at home, and of course, you see, I then had a daughter when I was 19. I had Sarah, so there again, I didn't want to leave her. So I only did things that didn't take me away from home, and that fitted into my life. So I had lots of starts and stops and starts and stops. I loved working with Bryan. I worked with Bryan in small parts on things like L-Shaped Room, and various bits and pieces that I did for Bryan, League of Gentlemen, things that I could do. And then I also continued to do odd things. So I suppose really it wasn't until The Wrong Box, which was when Emma was born, that I started to work more seriously again.
You set rather modest store by the career thus far, but in fact I know there have been awards, so tell us something about those, and don't attribute them to Brian. I promise again we'll come back to him in a while.
Well, yes, I got an award for International Velvet, and an acting award, and I got an acting award for The Raging Moon, which I did actually make with Brian. Brian wrote it and directed it, and that was nice for me because it was a very low-budget film when Brian was at EMI, and he wrote the part for me, which is a wonderful thing to have a part written for you, because it then becomes tailor-made to your particular attributes. And Malcolm McDowell was in it, and we all shot it. Everybody made it for virtually nothing, and happily it turned out to be a successful film. It had marvelous notices. It had marvelous notices in America particularly, and it didn't get a distribution for some unknown reason in England. They just had a love story and a lot of political reasons, I guess, but it did have wonderful notices. So we had that to go, which was wonderful for us, you know.
Alongside the acting, which I know continues, there is also the question of the advertisements that you make. Can you tell me whether you do, or indeed whether you feel obliged always to use the products that the virtues of which you extol?
Well, I haven't done advertisements. I've only done one ad, which is obviously the Fairy Liquid ad. And the thing about it is that going into it, because it was going to be quite a long contract, I don't think I would have wanted to, whatever they pay you don't really want to get up there and advertise something that you think, oh, this is real drecky stuff, and I wouldn't ever use it. So I don't think really that would be advisable. I do actually happen to think it's the best, really. And I'll tell you something very funny about that. Because one night, Brian and I were doing the washing up. And Brian was standing there, and he was doing the washing, and I was doing the drying. And he suddenly turned to me and he said, do you know something really strange? And I said, what? He said, do you know this really... Now he suddenly starts to do my dialogue. And I said, that's my dialogue you're doing. Quite off the cuff, But no, I genuinely think it is good. And I'm happy that they've been very nice to me. I've done it for quite some time now. And they're very nice people to work with. And it's lovely because it's some money in the bank, pays a lot of bills.
Nanette, your husband's study is, in the nicest sense of the word, littered with pictures of you, and also, if I remember, rather pleasant little messages from you as well. So now, tell me a little bit about the man, and also then, if you wish, go on to tell me what it's like to be married to a man who is obviously so frenetically busy.
I think it's very polite of you to say his study is littered. You could say grotesquely untidy. Brian lives... that room... I rarely go in to clear it up because Brian then can't find anything. He lives in a state of total chaos in there. But he's sort of to live with. Well, I have to say that he's one of the nicest and kindest people I've ever met in my life. I think after 30 years of marriage, if you can say that you are very much in love with somebody, it's absolutely the best luck that you could have. And I think it is luck. I don't think there's a blueprint for marriage, and I don't believe all those people that work hard at it and sort of make it into a job. Do you know what I mean? I think it's lucky at the age of 16 to find somebody that you adore and go on adoring. I've been enormously lucky, and that's not to say that we don't have dramas and have rows, and we're not at all alike. You see, that's the other thing. That's perhaps one of the good things. Brian is, Brian is an amazing... Well, you've interviewed him and you've met him, so you know. He's very confident. He's a very daring person. He's one of those people who has a go at things, which I think is a very admirable quality. I am not a very confident person, therefore he's very good for me because he's always boosting me and saying, have a go. Well, what can you lose? If it's a disaster, you fall on your behind and you get up and start again, which I probably wouldn't do if I was on my own. I think, oh, what a nightmare. This isn't going to work. But he has that wonderful, I think it's a thing that a lot of Cockneys have, of tremendous guts, to do things and dare things. And I think that's wonderful. So really, in that way, he is chaotic to live with. I think we've settled for a very chaotic life, where we've had to. I mean, we've had no choice, because we live in a profession where you never know really what's going to happen a few weeks. Bryan, now I'm doing this, Bryan happens to be in Finland. It might well have been that was cancelled and he might have had to go to Rome, or he could have been at home, or I could have had to go off somewhere, So we do lead very chaotic lives. We're probably together more than most people, because we try and juggle that element of our life so that we are together a lot, because we actually like being together. We don't like being separated. But there are occasions where we have to be, naturally. And I really rather like living with him. I mean, he's untidy, he's disorganized. I think he's an immensely clever writer. I have nothing but admiration for his writing. I think he's a wonderful director. He's extraordinarily vague and very funny. He makes me laugh. He's sort of mad. He's mad. He has an area of sort of total Monty Python madness about him, which I find very endearing. I wouldn't like to be married to somebody who didn't make me laugh.
Not only does he make you laugh, but you will find that he worships the ground you walk on. But anyway, there you are. Okay, let's move from Bryan, if that is physically possible, to the children.
Well, I have 2 daughters, and Sarah will be 29 this year, and Emma is 23. And Sarah is married to the actor John Standing and has 2 children, one of 2, one of 3. Emma is married to a banker called Graham, which is wonderful. Nice to have a banker in the family. And moment of sanity is lovely. I adore both my daughters' husbands, and I am rather besotted with my daughters. It's awful, isn't it? I'm sure people go, yuck, listen to her. But I do adore them. I think they went through periods where they were less adorable, and like all children do, where you sort of despair at moments and think, oh my God, what's going to happen? But overall, I'm enormously proud of them. They have a lot of qualities that I'm terribly thrilled that they have. And I like them as well as love them. I once met somebody, I won't say who it was because it's somebody I know you would know, and she said, she's talking about her daughter who's very successful and very well known, and she said, I'll always love her, but the sad thing is I don't like her. And I thought, oh, how awful, that is sad, isn't it? Well, I'm happy that I both, love and I do like my daughters. And Bryan has always been marvellous to them. He's always been, I think I was really, if I'm honest, I was the rather disciplined one. Bryan, as an example of that, I remember one way they used to endlessly argue at breakfast, and breakfast used to be totally chaotic with a lot of, no, you pass the toast, no, you pass, all that used to go on, those things that drive you mad at 7:30 in the morning. And one morning Bryan had enough, and he said, I will not have this. You have got to learn to behave at breakfast. And all this arguing, and he went absolutely mad, shouting a really dramatic scene. And as he walked out, he said, so you have got to stop. And he thumped his hand on the table, otherwise I won't have breakfast with you, and Mummy and I are sick, and out he went, And these 2 little faces watched him go, and Emma turned to Sarah and she said, oh, isn't Daddy sweet when he's in a bait? And I thought, well, forget it, And they've always adored him, and whenever they've been in trouble, he has done everything he can for them. He's a marvellous father.
What sort of a grandfather is he?
Oh, wonderful. I mean, I'm afraid, I think we're both in the area for spoiling our grandchildren. And Sarah has said, I'm often saying, Sarah, won't it be wonderful when they're old enough to stay with us? And she said, yes, but I'll never get them back, which may be true. It's very funny, you probably find this, that suddenly, having got your family grown up, and you start to do, I don't know whether you did this, but you start to think to yourself, I am now going to do all those things that I always meant to do. And funnily enough, you find it, you suddenly think, what were they? What were they? I can't remember what they were. Because you think, I was always saying, oh, when the children are growing up, I'll do that, I'll do this. And you think, what was it? What was it? I can't remember what it was. But you suddenly are much freer. And I'm, when they obviously got married and left, I started to do more things with my career. And then suddenly when they come back, there are these little tiny things again. And you start to say, oh, yes, I remember you doing that. And certain things that in those children you see that you had in your children. And it's you love them in a totally different kind of way, don't you? But it's so wonderful. And sadly, they live in LA. So our phone bills are enormous and the airfares are enormous. And I just hope that, we always have that contact with them and that they get to like us.
You also write.
Yes, I'm thrilled about that because I was never, it wasn't something that I ever thought of doing or thought I could do. I've now done 30-odd books and I'm so thrilled about it because it started, is it 12 years ago or maybe a bit longer, but I just wanted to do a book for a particular charity, ICANN, which I've always been involved with, Invalid Children's Aid Association, and I wanted to raise money for them. And at that time, funnily enough, people hadn't done books. Now everybody's doing books for charity, but nobody had done it before. And I thought, wouldn't it be a great idea to do a book, collection of children's sayings and drawings for this charity? And I was lucky enough to get a publisher, lucky enough that it got off the ground, and lucky enough that it made a lot of money for the charity, and also lucky enough that it started me on a career which I would have never become involved with. I then started to write children's stories, and I found that I enjoyed doing it, and that also that they sold, and I did more and more, and then I was very at one period into health food in an obsessive way. I mean, I was, really your average nightmare about it. And I spent 4 years, my children, they were to have the best teeth, the best skins. And they say now, Sarah sometimes said, Mummy, the reason I'm obsessed with chocolate is you denied me when I was a child, so you can't win. But I then did 2 health food books for children, which somebody hadn't done before, so that was lucky. And I've now done 5 cookery books, so I did cookery books. And it's something that I fell into but have pursued, and maybe by living with a writer, reading, Bryan pointed me in the direction of reading a great deal, which I hadn't done until I met him, and finding something that I could do, albeit in a minor way, because obviously writing for children is not a major thing like a novel. It's been a great thrill for me, like somebody giving me a gift and saying, here you are, you can have this, and use it.
What are you doing now?
Well, at the moment, I just had a new cookbook come out, which I did with my 2 daughters, called Entertaining, which is around now, which we did just before Christmas, which again was nice to work with my 2 daughters. And I've got another book coming out. I had another book called Bad Baby, which came out at the same time. I'm in the throes of doing another book for children called Sharing, which will come out this year. And I'm also hoping to put together a television program, a series on entertaining, which I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I won't say too much about it because I'm hoping it comes up. And obviously I want to continue acting because I always think of myself, basically I am an actress. I'm just an actress who, but I love doing lots of things, and I don't ever want to do one thing, and I want to try and do lots of different things. I'm a Gemini, I'm a dilettante, I'm a whatever you say, something of lots of things and a master of none. If you say to me, wouldn't this be a wonderful idea? I'd say, oh, wouldn't that be a wonderful idea? And I go off in that direction. So I'm never going to be terrific at one thing, but I'm going to be doing lots of things.
Finally then, I'm going to invite you, as I do most guests, to put yourself in the position where every memory you have is to be taken from you, and you were to be left with only one memory. Would you like to share that one memory with us?
Well, I think that's the most difficult question, and I would have to say that if I would have to make the choice, I would like to have a memory of being in love with Brian, with my children, and of a memory of one of our, or all of our, if I could be very greedy, happiest times together. And Brian would be the basis and the cause and the reason and the joy and the happiness of that memory.